All right. Thanks everybody for coming in and listening. If you were here for Handshake Origin Story Part One, welcome back for Part Two. In Part One, we talked about, well, we went really deep on that one. That was like almost 2 hours, but we discussed like the preparation and lead up to like mining, how we assisted like getting the initial like technical community up and going, a lot of the kind of back end discussion and lead up before Handshake was sort of an idea, and then of course the launch, post launch, and like more tidbits kind of here and there. So that gave everyone like a solid overview of just kind of like where Handshake is coming from. So like Handshake as a technology, as we all know, infrastructure wise, utility wise, is awesome, right? It's artisanally made. It's very excellent behind the scenes when you really start to think about it and kind of the overall protocol specification and what JJ and the rest of the HSD team and Handshake development community has like brought to fruition thus far, and that's been incredibly impressive, and that's not to be denied. But the one of the important things that I've learned being in crypto now here, like 9.5 freaking years, which makes me feel old when I say that out loud. But still baby face, still feeling good. That's what happens when you get into crypto earlier and you don't have stress for most of your 20s. But regardless, there was a lot of interesting emotional aspects to Handshake's launch that, one of the things that I like to do is like I really like to understand people psychologically. So I really like to pay attention to people so I can understand like their motivations, who they are, what they're capable of, etc. Probably comes from a scarcity fear background myself, like always needing to be on my toes because you never know who your enemy is. But then, translating in the professional world, it basically means that like I'm like hyper vigilant of everything that's going on around me. And I really like kind of understand like what people want and need. It really helps us like as a manager, as a leader, when you're, kind of helping bring things from 0 to 1. It's really important to really kind of understand on an internal level, who people are, and also who they work best with, and who they're compatible with. And the reason I was said this is called Cupid's Revenge is because it's really funny, kind of this like the lead up of general motivations that ultimately led to Handshake. Because if they'd have went any other way, I don't think Handshake would exist. So the story and lead up to that is probably worth telling at least once. So where can we best begin? Let's start with right before, and if you remember last time, before Handshake and before my starting Momentum Capital and working on Handy OSS stuff, I was working at Purse, right? I was doing growth and product content stuff, and really kind of just in strategy, really just kind of everything, helping wherever it is I could help Andrew as far as like scaling like the general company with the skill set that I had. And so that being said, when I came out to the Bay Area, it was originally for an integration engineering job. I had just come out of like getting my degree at Old Dominion University, and I was staying at my ex girlfriend's house. Her name's Genevieve. Um, and we had both just graduated. Her a year before me, and then I came afterwards. So I was kind of in that in between. Just graduated, just walked. You know, had a job, had an income, was doing pretty solid. I had been in crypto for a few years, so I was just kind of coasting, doing my own thing. And I decided that I was going to stay with her the summer after I had graduated. And during that time, I took a job doing like NLP, like big data stuff out in California. That led from like another contracting job. I had a company called Uphold, which is another big Bitcoin crypto brokerage, sort of like Coinbase competitor. And so it was one of the first jobs I had, doing like technical writing and stuff while I was still like in school. So when I finished up that, I was still working at Apple, and so I was not the most financially stable at the time, but I was doing all right. And so since I was staying with my ex-girlfriend, who was parents were very wealthy, so she was kind of off doing her own thing. She had gotten a job as well, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like coast here till I figure out like what my next move was. Ends up being like I'm gonna get relocated all the way out here to San Francisco, where I am now, where I've been since April of 2015. And when I was going to do that, she was like, no, don't go out there. That just makes our relationship like really complicated, which we had been dating since like March 27th, 2012, and this was early 2015 at the time, maybe around like late February. And I was like, I got to do it. I just got my degree. I got my pass in the middle class. I was the first one in my family to do so. So I was like, okay, if I go to San Francisco and go finesse and do the same hustling, same stuff that I know and can do out here with those folks, I do that long enough, then I'll just learn the game, and I'll be that much better off, and I can make much more money much more quickly. So, that was my general argument to her, and she's like, "Okay, well, if you're doing that," I'm like, "My lease is expiring here, and I'm going back to Connecticut, where she's from." And I was like, "Okay, well, you do that, and then I'll go vibe out there in California, try and get all set up, get a foundation out there that where you would feel comfortable moving out there, and then we can link back up again." So we did the whole long distance thing, which was tough. Um, when I first moved out here to San Francisco, just because it's so different compared to the rest of the East Coast. So, I did my best to come out here and, sleep on floors and kind of finesse some moving expenses from that company, and made my way here, right? And it wasn't easy. And of course, it was quite lonely for like almost the first year. And I did have Genevieve come visit me once, but the main motivator for me was like being in my early to mid 20s. I was like, I want to make sure that financially I'm not working some 9 to 5 grinding for someone. Like I have the capability to do what these startup founders and things like this are doing out here easily. I just need to like just hang out and see, kind of just like catch the process and see kind of socially how all this stuff, all the mechanics of these, the shit works, the inner office politics of the Bay Area stuff. You kind of really had to understand that and how it emerged. And the main motivation was I wanted to bring Genevieve out here, and I wanted to have like my own place, and it would be all nice. And we would finally like move in together and whatever, which she wanted me to do for the longest time. But I did not feel like I was like financially in a position in which I wanted to do that yet. So lo and behold, I started grinding my first year at that job, and then I took a 6 month sabbatical slash like early severance so that I could disregard my um, uh, any equity that I might have earned over that almost first year that I was working there, because truly I did not care. And mostly I just wanted like free cash so that I could like put money in crypto. So I took a big severance out of that to start my crypto full time journey, where I had mostly just been semi part time for many years, doing kind of basically what I do now, being in and around everywhere on the internet. And so while I was doing that, I eventually got the job that I had at Purse, and I finally felt comfortable with like the amount of money was making, and what I was doing. Where I was like, okay, you can move out here to San Francisco now. So she moved out here, but I was still like locked up in a lease at a place that was literally within walking distance of Purse. So it didn't make sense for me to move just yet. So she got a place cheaper, slightly further out of the city, but that didn't stop me from like literally walking back and forth to work to Perth like every single day, and then leaving there, and then getting on the BART, and then riding about 30, 40 minutes to her BART station, which was above like Berkeley, and then walking another 15, 20 minutes to like her house. And she did that because she couldn't afford with the job that she had moved here initially with, um, to live in the city. She had to live in the outside the city with roommates, which was cool because it was like a good getaway for me to get away from the noise, and it was like very quiet out there, and it was kind of like the East Coast a little bit. So it was a nice refrain from the stuff. Um, but every single day it was like going out there because I wanted to hang out with her. I wanted to talk about what went on in crypto that day, and we would make dinner together. And before all the moving out here, it was like we were both like so broke. So it was like going to get dollar menu stuff from like McDonald's and things like that so often. And then me worrying whether or not I had like money in my account. That was mostly college. And then like, towards the end, I kind of did, of course, a little bit better. Um, but really, we were constantly always scraping by, like cooking stuff in crock pots and, easy eats, things like that, things that were cheap. Definitely not the most nutritious, but all those things were made with love, you know what I mean? And it made, um, though there was a lack for a good long period of time, it made what seemed like a hustle not really a hustle. And that's really useful. That's the power of what like being in a good like long term relationship can do for you when you're like focused on somebody, because you know where your love comes from. It comes from inside, but then you're on the outside externally, like that really huge motivator, that self satisfier that comes from like having a good partner. That's unbeatable. And then when you have like a career ambition mixed in on top of that, in this case, like make crypto useful, get people utilizing these systems, help pull people out of poverty, help make the world more balanced, da 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 da. Like then it all sort of like folds together. Now it's like we're in this to win this, right? So of course during that time before Handshakes launch, we ended up like breaking up around late 2017 in December. Um, and it wasn't which is shortly after I had started my fund and got it like formulated and stuff. And so that caused like tremors and like uneasiness because I was about to be on this very heavy, like kind of growth trajectory. And she was really uneasy about that and like the amount of attention and stuff that I was getting in crypto and being covered in the news and stuff on a semi regular basis and going on TV. Like, that really threw her off. Like that she was like, I was not knowing any of this stuff was ever gonna happen. And so, of course, that had that caused its own tremors, but eventually, that relationship like had to end. Growing up through crypto, through all this process, and then going from like maybe nothing less than 50 to $100 in a bank account at any given moment, like all throughout college, and not really having any savings because like I was like paying a lot of stuff out of pocket and doing all that stuff. Um, it was a huge change of pace that took a while, and that even to this day, this very moment, is just like adjusting to making money. Fast money is a hard thing to do, um, especially on the opposite end of that. When I had like my ex too, who was everyone's a poor broke college student, so she went from nothing to having like millions of bucks. So that was that was also semi surreal, really. Honestly, in hindsight, feels like a dream. Um, and then during that time period, I had met Boima, who, if you guys are aware, is also another one of the early, creators of Handshake, one of the very early project owners. And when he was helping me start Momentum and left there to be a purse to manage the Bitcoin slash soon to be Handshake stuff, um, he was also in a relationship, which I won't speak too much about Boima because his privacy is important. But I will say that he was dating this woman at the time who, what was her name? Her name was Wamba. And we were kind of like couple friends, like myself, my girlfriend, and him and his lady. And, we would, go out and like hang out, like have brunch and, those sorts of things. And then we would get together, and Boymo and I would just like rant about crypto back and forth and da 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 da. Da as they what we would normally hope for them to like entertain themselves and talk amongst themselves. And that's how I really got to know Boyma, and that's how he ended up putting like a few grand like very early into like crypto into some projects, like kind of taking my word after me hanging out, basically like being like, dude, you've got to invest in crypto. And he's like, okay, okay, okay. And he was like, I'm just trying to like get things right for me in Wamba because he had lived out in Oakland. He had worked at Chain. He was making decent bucks out there, but he was still sort of had this same scarcity sort of mindset that I had too. He didn't come from a big wealthy family either. So for him, it was like, I'm just trying to get this back, and that's part of why he left Momentum earlier was because it takes time to build a fund and fundraise and grow your AUM and get your carry going and make profits. So for him, he didn't have that type of time, given his own personal reasons. So for him, he was like, I got to take care of this. So like once he had a good bit of decent crypto money, he was like, I'm gonna strike off on my own and do my own thing. And he had his own trials and tribulations in that relationship, which I believe they're no longer together. And they also like shortly like broke up as the Handshake project was starting like throughout like 2018. So, kind of similar boat where it was like, okay, well, we both want to not only push our careers forward, but we want to put ourselves in a good position to be like nest egg. You know what I mean? Like have a good bit of money on the side where you could feel comfortable to kind of move into the next, tiered processes of being in a good long term relationship. And then even during all that, while I was at Purse, before even I was at Amentum and started Amentum and Handshake got started, there was of course the story of JJ. And so JJ, who doesn't speak much on social media, which is a shame, but once you get to know him, it makes a lot of sense. And then his now girlfriend Christine, which many of you know as Chengo, she works very closely with the Cosmos.
community and in and around the Handshake community, the D-Web Foundation, etc. So, as a spiritual leader in the space, like she's definitely kind of like up there. Just from the sake of not only her own contributions to the industry, but kind of like Handshake really wouldn't exist without those two being together, and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. So um, it was, gosh, maybe early 2017, maybe late 2016, early 2017, and early 2017. And we had went to a meetup, and Andreas Antonopoulos was there, and he had actually I got to send me some of his not mastering Bitcoin, the Internet of Money books, and he sent a bunch of them signed to Purse because he was a big fan of Purse, and we were going to use it as sort of like a marketing thing. We were going to give those away, and then we were also going to use that as some of the signed copies as like hackathon gifts, right? And like we're gonna give them away there. And so we had linked up with Andreas and got all these books for a giveaway, and then we had some left over. So I was like, we should just do a Twitter giveaway, to help kind of grow the social side and help support Andreas, who supports us here at Purse, and always talks so nicely about it as a use case for Bitcoin. And so we did that giveaway, and then came time to like pick a winner, and usually you would throw a tweet into this like random generator that would like just like pick a random tweet, and then like that's like fair. And so usually that's how I would do it. Usually, but I was the one kind of in charge of this like random like giveaway contest thing because it was like my idea. And I was like, all right, I'm going to own this, Andrew, because it was my connection with Andreas, who was my friend, to give me the copies and stuff like that. Anyway, so I was like, want to make sure it's done right, and it's spoken about well, and his brand is respected correctly. So we goes time comes time to like pick a winner, and so I'm like, okay, all right, how am I gonna do this? So I just happened to there wasn't too many shares. There's probably somewhere like 50 to like 80, maybe like retweets somewhere in that range. And so I was scrolling through like the full list of like people, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna pick somebody. So there was a conversation that JJ and I had, and it's okay if any of this is like personal. I'm sure he'll forgive me in the future. But we always sit around and just bullshit in the office. We talk about drugs, psychedelics, crypto, stuff going on in life. You talk shit about tech going on in space, bullshit about the block size scaling debate, which was like ongoing at the time. We talk about all sorts of random things. And so when I had started there, I think he had been dating some Asian girl down like near like Stanford or something like that, or maybe somewhere here in the Bay Area. And then, he was a big fan of her, and then that didn't work out too well. And I can read people really well, and so he was telling me about it. I could tell that he was really, really down about it. So I was like, man, what a nice guy, so smart, so nerdy. And I was like, man, what girl would like mess this up? JJ, you get to know him, real sweet, soft-looking fellow for the most part. Incredibly intelligent, knows lots of pop culture references. Good person to talk to about just things in general. So I noted that in my head, and I was like, oh, well, that's a shame. He really needs a nice lady. So as I'm scrolling through things, I'm always trying to think of like growth hacking strategy things, right? So and I'm like, and I come across Chango's profile, and I saw that she was like a writer, like BTC manager, which was like another kind of like semi wannabe like CoinDesk back in the day. It might even still exist. And she was just like a writer, another journalist that was very competent, and I had read some of her stuff. And so I was like, okay. And I was like, so if I get the book to her, then I could potentially finesse a favor out of this to have her um, uh, be able to, potentially write something about Purse in the future, get some SEO going, kind of, favor for a favor. This was early crypto days. So, I was trying to figure out means by which to get more penetration here and there for like the Purse brand where the strategy made sense. So, and then, of course I looked at her profile and I was like, well, she seems like a really sweet girl. I really like her vibe. Really good at picking up energies, even digitally. I don't need to be in person. I can just literally like just kind of feel your energy through the phone or a computer. It's really strange. But anyways, so I was like, okay, who who is this person? And I was like, I really like her vibe. And I was like, oh man, she'd really like JJ. And I was like, JJ would really like her too. And I was like, how can I get him to meet her? And then so we reached out to her, And I was like, hey, yeah, we were gonna send you your prize. Just give us your address and da da da. And she was like, I'm actually gonna be in San Francisco on like X date, like very soon. Like, maybe I can come into the purse office and pick it up. And I was like, sure. Yeah, that sounds like an even better idea, like and she was like, will JJ be in the office? I believe. And I was like, well, yeah. And she's like, okay, yeah, I want to come by and like pick it up. So I was like, great. So JJ usually always has a e-vape in his hand, and it's one of the interesting quirks about my memories of him in the office is that between every other sentence, he would just hit his little, e-vape pen with some juice, and then blow it out, and then continue a very eloquent point or some explanation about something. And so, I would sit next to him, and he would just be toking there all day in like some terminal with very tiny text. And whenever he stepped away from his computer for even like half of a second, he would always lock it in his keyboard. And so he was just always in his zone. And so I would always like go over and prod and like annoy him sometimes just to bring it back to reality. And so I was like, hey, you got somebody coming into the office today, JJ. And he's like, oh, really? And for some reason, him and Derek, which is a recruiter, HR guy for a little bit, they got into really obsessed autistically with like speaking a Scottish accent. And this persisted for a solid 3 or 4 months. Every single fucking thing they said was in a Scottish accent. And they would always be like, "Aye, boyo," and I can't do it very well. But these cats, they fucking love that stuff. So JJ's talking to me in a Scottish accent, hitting his e-vape, and he's like, "Oh, someone's coming into the office, you say?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Actually, I think you might find her pretty cute. Uh, she's a writer in the crypto space. She's pretty sharp, but yeah, she'll be here in a few minutes." And he's like, "Okay." So someone comes knocking on the door, da da da, let her in. I'm like, oh, hey, Christine, nice to meet you, da da da, congratulations for winning the contest. Welcome to our nice, humble little office, which was literally like this tiny little hole in the wall in the mission for a while, which was like, 3 separate rooms and then like this like separate kitchen and like bathroom. Yeah, it was humble, but it was a nice office and it was very cozy. And so, and I'm like, oh yeah, Christine, like this is JJ, and da 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 da. And he built all the stuff at first, real smart fella. It's like, oh JJ, nice to meet you, yada yada, right? So fast forward, some weeks like go by, whatever, after this initial engagement, and I'm like, oh yeah, JJ, um, you should talk to that Christine girl. It seemed like she was like kind of really into you. And he's like, oh, I already have been. And I'm like, well, damn, well, great. And he's like, yeah, she's like really cool. I think, I think she likes me. And mind you, I'm like, was it 2016, 2017? I'm like 26 at the time. JJ's like 2 years older than me. So maybe 2.5, 3 years older than me. And I'm 31 now, so he must be like 33. And so this was a while ago, right? And he's like, yeah, I've been talking to her and things have been, going pretty well. And I was like, great. So fast forward now again to like me leaving Purse as I'm starting at Mentum, and at this point, JJ has this was like October 2017. JJ has like stopped coming in and out of the office as often. He's just been at work grinding, starting work on something, on top of like continuing to work on Bitcoin. And so, I get started on like working on Momentum, and he obviously, of course, his relationship matures and etc. throughout this process. And then, of course, Christine goes off to like work on and help like launch Cosmos. So that kind of like really breeded an early relationship between just the generalized Cosmos ecosystem because she was part of that launch community. And then, of course, at the same time, she's like living in, she's like around JJ, right? All like during these years, as I'm sure, like listening to all of his design decisions for Handshake and why he's building what, like what, and da 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 da. Um, so when it comes to like DVPN and the cache and like that early support from our side from Handy OSS, a lot of that comes from just like knowing that Christine was adjacent to that space and that Cosmos was interesting. I actually did a panel with Belfius for Belfius Bank here in San Francisco privately at one of these restaurants in one of these like back rooms or whatever to like talk about crypto back in like 2017 as they were still building Cosmos. They were talking about the future is multi-chain, and every chain is going to have a purpose and stuff like Ethereum is gonna make sense, and so that close like relationship between like all of us here in like the Bay Area, and then of course, Boima was friends with those guys and Zaki and all them, and his was the love of his family and getting himself to a stable position to like be in a adult like long term successful relationship with everything that he needed and myself, and then of course JJ too, right? Building something to like secure like his future and to like intellectually, satisfy like himself. JJ just likes to build things, just to build things. Um, like that's where his fun is. He's never been really like kind of like profit oriented. But then of course you've got Christine, who's incredibly crypto savvy and is a great investor herself, right? Like being like early on in Cosmos, that like took a lot of guts. Um, so that's incredibly impressive. And so kind of the idea is that like it's like Cupid's Revenge. It's just like sometimes love is a positive short to midterm thing that helps you grow into the person that you need to be to bring forth the innovations and stuff that the world needs to see. It's kind of how God works sometimes, right? Karmically, He just sort of aligns you with those sort of people that can not necessarily the best for you, but who are the best for you at that time. And and sometimes you can grow and realize like your own selves together and self actualize in parallel and keep those relationships strong and thriving, and sometimes you're at a difficult place in your life in order to do those things. But when it comes to like building a community, right, like in the roots of Handshake, it all started on love. And then that's not even to mention Andrew Lee, whose wife, whose first name I won't mention because they're relatively private family. But and they were dating and got married, and now they have a son too. And part of Andrew's, I'm sure, his plan now, since he's out homesteading, and left the Bay Area as well, is I want a place for my family. I want to feel secure. I don't want to just have built all this stuff in crypto and help Bitcoin become as big as it did like early on and not get a piece of the pie, right? Because everyone knew that what we were contributing was, of course, very useful, but we wanted to like lay our stake in the ground. And so during that time period too, I ended up dating someone else. Her name was Gabriella, and I was with her throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and actually, and during even the launch of Handshake. She wasn't with me in Georgia when we were launching it. She stayed back in San Francisco because she was busy with her PhD lab work. But she was there cooking me food when I would forget not to eat for days at a time. She was the one reminding me to like, you should take care of yourself. You should make sure you like get outside. You should take a vacation. You should put down your phone. Like you should. Yes, I know all this stuff sounds very important, Stephen. I'm glad you want to save the world and all that, but like you really need to take care of yourself. And that when you're, sometimes when you're so self-obsessed and with your pursuit of like creating important things to help others, sometimes you really forget to help yourself. And I think that's something that a mistake that a lot of smart people make just because they want to bring something like great into the world. But it's about like having a balance too, right? So like being brash, being bold, being able to like take risks, speak your mind, that's important. But then also you got to balance that with an equal amount of love. You can't have just love because you can get lost in that, and you can like, end up in codependent like situations because you cannot ever lose like the pursuit of the self, like what it is you're here on Earth to do. But at the same time, you have to have love as a fuel to get you there. And the same thing happens with the general handshake community. Sometimes we're all going to be a lot loving and virtuous and kind and say exactly what people want to hear and be empathetic. And then sometimes we're going to think before we speak and still speak things that might not be nice to hear, especially for people outside the community that don't understand Handshake just yet, don't understand the ethos, don't understand what we're building, have not even like concretely looked at the technology to really understand universally applicably what it is. As an extension of the NS and not as a direct competitor, right? There's still those distinctions that are like most often made. So but sometimes when you're dealing with people's like ego and their like ignorance and like inability or refusal to understand something, sometimes you got to meet them at their energy, right? sometimes you can't meet a bully with kindness and think they'll stop bullying you. At the same time, you can't meet ignorance, with kindness and think that you're gonna get people to listen. Good example of that is like, I don't know, the entirety of the whole Trump fan base and administration, right? Doing bad things. Ultimately, people are telling you you're doing bad things, but you're not going to listen because what you're a bad person, or you never sought to actually reach a state of agreement. That was never part of the plan. And so to get someone to lean your way, sometimes you got to be, yeah, you just got to meet them on their level, meet them on their frequency. And but most of the time, you want a place of love. You want to be mindful of what the end game of the pursuit is, right? In this case, and we did the small little private investor round the early handshake team did, and that was only 100 million HNS, and all those investors bought in at 10 cents. It's not really that large in comparison to the amount of handshake that will, and of course, eventually be in circulation. The amount that has been mined, and also the amount of handshake people have made, like relative to just flipping names at this point. So we got to, of course, spread the love, but at the same time, just like the Bitcoin community and the handshake community, sometimes you got to stand up for yourself, right? Like we got to be able to develop norms for that. Just like in a relationship, you have to set boundaries, right? In love, it's very important that you set healthy boundaries between you and the people that you interact with, the communities you interact with, right? Your friends, your family, right? Everything has to have a healthy boundary so that you can share your energy with people that you love the most, without draining yourself. And it's the same in the handshake community, right? You'll hear the same people make the same arguments about brave integrations and name collisions and all this other sort of stuff. So you can try and meet them on their level with love if they're coming at you with love and you want to meet and have like those hard discussions. But if they come out at you with angst and anxiety and you probe and you try your best to get them to see who you are and to understand your point of view, and they refuse, but it's still very important that they do, and you make it a point, and you make an example out of that opportunity. And then sometimes you gotta stoop low, and that's okay, and that's totally okay to do. That's totally okay thing to do in life, as long as it's not illegal, of course, right? You're not. These aren't inter-office relationships. This isn't, what I mean. This isn't some team discord, for some corporate entity or some startup. This is just the internet. This is just a bunch of disparate groups on the internet who are aligned on one narrative and a vision. And that vision is like unifying people through like love and then being able to adopt a decentralized like technology. So, that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And so, there's all these different technologies, and you can't get your love from one place, right? Like, you got to get some love from a cache to get your compute. Got to get some love from DVPN for this bandwidth stuff. Got to get some love for SIA for storage, right? Just like you just can't get love from one partner. I can't just get it from my boyfriend or my girlfriend or just my parents, or just like you need friendships. You need a support network, and sometimes just like with your friends, you got to be real with them, right? Like that's those closest relationships you have with your friends and your loved ones are the ones where you can tell it how it is, and then move on, still forward, and still maintain respect with each other, right? And you're going to meet people in and around the community in the same way. Kind of another example of just like Cupids Revenge. People are going to fall in love with the technology, but they might not necessarily fall in love with the ethos and narrative that you have or that you're following with the large group majority of the community. So you either have to get them to align their interests with you all, or maybe adopt whatever it is like they're working on, or however it is their state of mind is, if it's actually useful. There's not really too much to this part of the story. The general idea is to just like understand that people have different motivations for building things, and sometimes people can invest different levels of emotion in their projects too. And so that's why I really say that, like, if you help launch a chain, like you really put a bit of your soul into it, right? A bit of like your future, imagination of like what could have been or what could be. And I think that's a really special thing to remember, um, especially as we're building technologies that aren't just about like greed or printing money. It's not just about spending as many tokens as possible, throwing them in a DAO, and like letting people be proof of stake validators and start printing some passive income, right? It's about creating, and it's about being thoughtful. It's about being mindful, But again, it's also about being dynamic and adjusting for the community and the audience, and being able to have tough conversations, and meeting people on their level. So that's about everything for part two. There will, of course, eventually be a part three, which I'll figure out what that topic and all that stuff will be. It'll probably be in relation to like post stuff that's happened interesting in like Handshake, and then any other additional like tidbits that I can like come up with. But thanks for popping in and listening for the past like 40 minutes, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And Fistful, when you get this recording up on YouTube or something like that, please share it so Handy OSS can carry that forward. I hope you guys enjoyed learning more about the loving place that Handshake came from, and I hope you guys start to really understand and appreciate the energies that are in the ecosystem as we continue to move forward. You guys have a great day.